Hello, friends. Welcome to All Things Kitchen. Today we are going to be making biscotti, chocolate biscotti. The recipe is actually a triple chocolate biscotti. I haven't decided if I'm going to do the triple yet, which would be a chocolate drizzle on top, but we are definitely at least making a double chocolate biscotti. If you are new here, welcome. Thank you for joining. If you are returning, thank you for coming back. If you have been here before, you may notice that I am not in my kitchen, in my home. I am actually visiting my son and daughter-in-law and using their kitchen. They were gracious enough to let me borrow their kitchen so I could share this recipe with you. So I have all of my ingredients all ready to go. So I'm hoping that this will be a nice, quick, easy thing to put together. But if you've not made biscotti before, it may sound intimidating. If you've seen it, it may look intimidating. May not. It may look easy to you. It is fairly easy. Biscotti is actually a twice baked cookie. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'll bring you down and we'll get all the ingredients mixed up together. I have my oven preheating right now to 350 degrees, and I have a cookie sheet lined with parchment paper. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I have 2 cups of flour, just all-purpose flour right here, and I am going to whisk together the cocoa, which this is a half a cup of unsweetened cocoa. And I'm just going to pour that in there and see if I can get it all out of the bowl. I have 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt. And so I'm just going to whisk these ingredients together after I make sure I get them all out of the bowl. Set these aside. And I am not at home, so I don't have all my normal baking supplies. So I'm just using this whisk, which is perfectly fine. If I was at home, I would use my sifter so that I could incorporate these really well, make sure there's no lumps in that cocoa. But sometimes you just work with what you have, right? So I'm just looking for any lumps. And I see a couple of lumps in the cocoa, but that should get mixed up just fine once we get the beater to it. And then what I'm going to do is I have 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to switch these out. And now the recipe calls to pretty much for a paddle attachment, like on a stand mixer. But again, I'm not at home and I don't have my normal equipment, so I don't have a stand mixer here. I do have a regular hand beater, hand mixer, and that's what I'm going to use. So again, we're just going to use what we have. So I have 6 tablespoons of butter in here, and I'm just going to, it is room temperature, and I'm just going to blend this just to soften and make the butter light and airy. I know this is an awfully big bowl for the amount of butter that we have here, but this is the bowl that I'm going to be mixing everything in, so I wanted to make sure it was big enough. I'm already dirtying every bowl in the house, so. So I've got that blended so that it's nice and fluffy, and now I'm going to add in 1 cup of sugar. And I'm going to blend these together. This is creaming the butter and sugar together. I'm going to take a moment and scrape down the sides again. Since I don't have my paddle attachment, the paddle attachment I have on my stand mixer does pretty much scrape down the sides for me. That's okay. Have you guys ever made biscotti before? Or if you haven't, have you tried it before? Have you eaten it? And what flavors have you had? Cranberry orange is my favorite flavor for a lot of things, and I really like it in biscotti. But my son doesn't care for orange, so I'm doing chocolate. So now I'm going to add in 2 eggs, but I'm going to add them 1 at a time. And these eggs are at room temperature. Scrape down the bowl again. So I have both of those eggs added. Had a little shell in there I had to fish out. And now I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I actually did measure the vanilla this time just so I would have everything all put together for you guys. So that looks good enough to eat already. So now what I'm going to do is incorporate my flour and cocoa mixture in here. And I'm going to add half of it at first. It doesn't have to be exact. Just eyeball. And of course, you want to start this out on low so you don't throw flour everywhere. Oh, there's a puff of cocoa in the air. Again, I'm going to scrape down the bowl. I may have to mix in the second half by hand because it is throwing flour everywhere, at least to get it started. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me get the second half of this in here. Now the recipe that I'm following, which I will put in the description below, some of the comments in it were that this is a very, very dry recipe and people had to add water. And the author of the recipe did state that sometimes, you know, of course, it depends on the size of your eggs. So the recipe does call for extra large eggs, I think. Yeah, extra large eggs, but that's still a variable. So adding water would be perfectly fine. Egg whites are mostly water, and that way you don't want a real wet dough, but if it's too dry, then you can just add a little bit of water to help compensate for having smaller eggs, or you can add a whole extra egg if you wanted to. which I'm thinking, I'm going to get the beater in here first to see if I can blend this and see what it looks like. But this may be a little too dry for what I need, so I may need to add a whole nother egg. We will see. Actually, I think this might be okay. I think this looks good because it's not too dry, it's not all crumbly, and it's not so wet that it's sticky. I mean, there's cocoa on my hands, but cocoa is going to do that. So let me just give this a real quick other blend, and then I'll be right back. I have here 1.25 cups of dark chocolate. The recipe called for baking dark chocolate baking chunks or chips. And so basically what I did is I just took a candy bar, dark chocolate, and I cut it up into chunks. So I really like dark chocolate. I actually prefer it over the other chocolates. FYI, it goes so good with a glass of red wine. And I bet these biscotti will too. I'm going to add in 3/4 of a cup into the mix, and then I'm going to see what it looks like, because the remainder is to do a chocolate drizzle on top. And like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. So, but that's what I'm going to try to do. This dough is fairly stiff, so I had to get a different spatula. I don't even know if this one's going to be stiff enough. I might have to get a wooden spatula to try to blend this in. I can definitely see why the recipe calls for a paddle attachment. And the recipe does say, you know, to continue using the paddle attachment on slow speed to mix in the chocolate chips. But this dough is pretty stiff, so it was working the mixer a little too hard. So I'm adjusting. So there's about 3/4 of a cup, and let's see what I can do to blend this together. I probably could have chopped that chocolate up a little bit finer. When they said chunks, I guess I took them literally. And I'm wondering if some of these, like that's just too big. So if I see any really large chunks like that, I'm going to go ahead and take them out and chop them up a little bit more. And I'll know for next time. And now you know, if you are using a candy bar instead of chocolate chips, that when they say chunks, that's a subjective term for sure. Oh my goodness, look at these. I guess I was just in the mood to eat some chocolate. I mean, because like those are way too big. Now, I like to think that any recipe that calls for special equipment, like a stand mixer, that you can work around, but this dough is very, very stiff. I'm going to make it work, but I want you to be prepared that if you don't have a stand mixer and you don't want to break your hand mixer, that it is definitely going to take some elbow grease and blending this. So you can see how tough it is. I'm going to go ahead and finish doing this off camera so I don't have to worry about being in shot because the bowl keeps sliding on me. and I'll be right back. Okay, friends. Now, I've told you I've made biscotti before, but I've never made chocolate biscotti. So this is a new recipe to me. And I went ahead and added a little bit of water to the dough to try to blend in those chocolate chunks. And I put the hand mixer I used the hand mixer to do that. And it threw chocolate everywhere. And like, I have a dog at home. My son has a dog here. So poor thing, had to yell at her to get out so I could go and clean up all the chocolate splatter. I don't have any chocolate on my face, do I? The chocolate on the camera, my tablet that I was reading the recipe on the floor. I'm going to have to double check that it's not all over the cabinets. So learn from me. Don't do that. Okay. I've told you before, and I will always tell you, I'm going to share my successes and my failures. So I have the dough kind of workable now. It is a little bit stickier, which is fine. You can just kind of dampen your hands. And I'm going to cut this in half, or divide it in half, and make 2 logs out of this dough. And this batch makes, I think it said, about 36 biscotti. That will depend on how I cut it and whatnot, obviously. So I'm going to bring you back down and we'll continue on. Mishaps happen, messes happen in the kitchen. As long as you don't get too frustrated with it and just persevere, even if it doesn't turn out the prettiest, it will taste good. But I'm sure we can recover this no problem. It was just chocolate everywhere. It was like raining chocolate. Every girl's dream, right? Not when you have to clean it up. All right, let me bring you back down and see what we can figure out here, okay? So let me get my hands damp and hopefully see what we can do. Now, the recipe says to make 2 12-inch by 2-inch, they call them logs. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do. So, and with my hands wet, it's not too bad. So I'm going to, I don't know that I'm going to get 12. Well, maybe I didn't quite grab half. There we go. So I just have this cookie sheet lined with parchment paper, and we're just going to eyeball this. I want to try to make it obviously as level, as even throughout, so that it bakes properly. And I don't think that's quite 12 inches, but we'll see what the other one gives us. So there's one. I'm going to re-wet my hands. It's not too bad. I mean, I did get stuff on my hands, but not too bad when you wet your hands. Let's see if I can get the rest of this out of the bowl, because it's still pretty stiff dough. And this should not really spread, so I don't have to worry about these being side by side. Let me kind of roll it into a log first, and then we'll flatten it out a little bit. So yeah, this one's going to be a little better in size. But, you know, since some of the dough went flying around the kitchen, don't tell my son that I may have lost some of the, that looks like a big chunk of chocolate right there. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna get my hands wet again. I'll try to fix that. There's another big chunk of chocolate underneath it. All right, it's not the prettiest thing. And let me see if I can get a little bit more out of the bowl. Okay. Again, it's not the prettiest. They're not exactly the same size. This is, I think, a little wider than 2 inches, but probably if this was a little narrower, it would be as long. So let me clean up my hands and I'm going to get this in the oven. I'm going to get this in the oven. I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees. We're going to bake this between 30 to 40 minutes until the cookie, if you will, the biscotti. This is the first bake. So until this is a little bit firm, a little bit firm to the touch, and it will start to crack a little bit on top. So I'm going to go ahead and get these in. Got the timer set for 30 minutes, and I'm going to get my mess cleaned up. And I will bring you back when I bring these out of the oven, and I'll show you what we do next. I hope you guys are having a great day. I'm having fun, even though it turned out a little weird. Wasn't expecting that to happen, but I'm having fun. I'm on vacation. Of course I'm having fun. I hope you're having fun too. I'll bring you back. The first bake is done. Let me get another pot holder. So this is what we have. It did spread a little bit, which surprises me, but that's okay. So I'm going to let this cool for about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less. You don't want it to cool down completely. Otherwise, when you go to cut it, it won't be right. So I'm going to just set these right here on the stove top to come down. Actually, I might move them because it is a little bit warm here. Just to let them sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'll bring you back when I cut them. So it's been about 10 minutes, and I'm going to grab my biscotti loaves, logs, base. We can come up with any name we want to, right? Going to grab them, move them over to a cutting board. It says to use, excuse me. The recipe says to use a chef's knife to cut these. So I have a very large knife, and I also have a serrated, like a bread knife, just in case. So I'm going to see which one works best. I'm going to probably use 2 spatulas to move them over to my cutting board, and we'll go from there. That moved pretty easy. So let me just kind of move this out of my way so I have some arm room. We're going to start with the chef's knife, and let me see. I'm going to cut these about 3/4 of an inch. Oh, these are cutting beautifully. A little bit of a crumble there. That's okay. The bigger ones, I'm probably going to cut a little bit thinner. Getting chocolate on my hands. That's from the chocolate chunks. Now, whenever I've made biscotti before, whenever I laid them out on the back on the tray, I always laid them on their side. But this one says that, you know, just leave some room in between, kind of something like that. And just leave them a little bit separated, but you can leave them sitting up. So that's a new one that I've never done it that way, but that's how we're going to do it because that's what the recipe says. So if you've never had biscotti or never heard of it, never seen it, like I said before, oh, that chocolate is hot. I don't want to lick my finger because I will be sharing these with other people besides just myself. Like I said before, biscotti is a twice baked cookie. And so it's very crisp. I am going to try this little piece right here. And that was pretty crisp, just like that. So when you bake it again, it gets very crunchy. And a lot of people like dip this in their coffee or tea. Like I mentioned before, I love dark chocolate and red wine together. So this would be an excellent like after dinner dessert because of all the chocolate. Definitely not very much at breakfast with all of this chocolate. Luna, go on. You can't have this. So we had a few crumbles that kind of fell off, but that's okay. We can still make it work. And I will bring this cookie sheet back over and show you how I'm going to arrange them after I get them on. One thing that the recipes always say is to cut this on the bias. And I've tried cutting it on a bias several different ways. You know, do they mean like this? Do they mean like this? What do they exactly mean when they say cut it on a bias? It's my kitchen, so I'm doing what I want and I just cut them straight. So how about that? So it's my cookie, I'm cooking them. I just cut them straight. If you know what they mean by the bias, do they mean cut the loaf at a diagonal, or do they mean cut the loaf like like at a 45-degree angle? What does a bias mean when they say that? Do you know? If you do, please tell me. Let me wash my hands. So I lowered the temperature of the oven down to 300 from 350, and I'm going to bake these for about 10 minutes. They look beautiful. So I have decided I'm going to do some of the chocolate drizzle on some of the biscotti. I don't know how much, you know, I could do one of those loaves, logs. I could do half of them, basically, is what I'm saying. So I'm going to try some with the drizzle and try some without, see which I like better. And then we'll go from there because you can't take the chocolate drizzle off once you put it on, but you can definitely add it if you didn't put it on to begin with. So the timer set for 10 minutes down to 300 degrees, and I'll bring you back when that's ready. While the biscotti is on its second bake, I thought I'd tell you about, so we are visiting, like I said earlier, our son and daughter-in-law, and it put us in the path of the solar eclipse. Unfortunately, it was very overcast, and we only had it peek through the clouds a couple of times, but I do have some footage of how dark it got. And I hope it's okay that I share that with you. It's not kitchen related, but I'm just going to put a little clip in here of how dark it got where we were, because we were in 100% of the eclipse. 1:34 and it feels like it's 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night.
That looks just like the sun just set.
Yeah. And I was just saying, could you imagine if you were not aware of what was going on and it got dark like this at 1:30 in the afternoon? Big dark cloud right where the sun's supposed to be. So I just wanted to share that with you. The temperature did drop about, I'd say 10, 15 degrees. What would you say, honey?
Yes.
Yeah, about 10 to 15 degrees, which that was really cool. And we were away from the city, so there weren't a lot of lights around, and there were a couple of street lights that came on and some automatic lights on some houses and stuff. But it was neat. In the vehicles, of course, their lights came on, anything that drove past us, but we were just kind of in a back area behind my son's house where they are building houses. And so it was a big open field where they haven't started yet. So we were away from the city and we were away from a lot of people, and we had a good time. We are having a good time here on vacation. Much needed rest has happened. A couple of naps have happened, and staying up way too late and eating good food and enjoying the great company that we have with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my daughter-in-law's family. So we will be home by the time this comes out. We will be home. And like I said before, I hope you're having a great day and a great week. So the timer's getting ready to go off. So I will bring you back when they come out of the oven. Timer just went off. So let me get these out of the oven. And see. Yeah, I think they're perfect. So I just took those out of the oven and set them on a cooling rack. I'm going to give it about 10 minutes and then take them off the tray and put them directly on the cooling rack and let them cool. And then we will melt some chocolate and put some chocolate on top of some of them. And we'll give them a taste, give them a try. My husband's going to be very excited. Oh, it's too hot to show you. I was just trying to pick up a piece. The very ends that are rounded, those are my husband's favorite. So he'll be happy to know that he has 4 when they're all ready. And we'll probably bring some home. We'll be flying out. Today is Thursday, and we'll be flying out soon. And I will, if there's any left over, we'll put some in a Ziploc bag for the flight home so that we can have a little snack if we want. But I will leave the rest for my family here. Okay, so the biscotti have come down to room temperature. I've got the rest of the chocolate that I had chopped up. I used about 3/4 of a cup in there. So that means I have about a half a cup of chocolate left in the bowl. I'm going to heat it up in the microwave. And we'll start about 30 seconds. I have the biscotti on a cooling rack with some parchment paper underneath. And basically what I'm going to do is take some of these off. So I just have part of what I cut up and I just put them together to make it easier to drizzle the chocolate on there. I'm going to grab this out of the microwave and give this a stir. See what I've got here. Just by mixing this up, the residual heat, this did take about a minute to get to this point. And let me just see here. I'm going to get it all melted. And this is, like I said before, this is dark chocolate. Let me see. This is my first time doing this, so we'll just drizzle some over here. And doing it on the cookie sheet over parchment paper will just help with cleanup. If you wanted to, you could just take the top and dip it into the melted chocolate if that would be easier for you. I think this is going to be pretty with the drizzles on there. I'm going to go ahead and separate these a little bit because I don't want them to all stick together when that chocolate hardens back up. So now we have some with the drizzled chocolate and some without. And I'll bring you up in just a moment. So I just gave one of the ends to my husband, and he said the texture is perfect. It has good flavor and just the right balance of chocolate. So I'm going to give this one a try. And it's crunchy. That is so good. That is so good. You know, we went to a farmer's market earlier in the week and we bought some. They had a local winery that was there selling wine, and we bought a bottle of blackberry wine. I wonder how that would be with this. That's really good. Thank you for joining me today while I'm here on vacation, resting, relaxing, still baking, still cooking in the kitchen. And I wanted to share that with you. Give this recipe a try. See, they're absolutely beautiful. And if you've never tried biscotti before, maybe find a recipe that you like, but I will put this recipe down in the description box and give it a try. It's really good. It's I just really like dark chocolate. If you're not a dark chocolate fan, just know, maybe you could leave off the drizzle or maybe use a semi-sweet chocolate to do the drizzle, but it's not a real deep dark chocolate flavor in the biscotti. So, but it's your kitchen, it's your rules. You can change it up if you want to. If you wanted to use semi-sweet, you could do that. Milk chocolate might be a little bit too sweet, but again, your kitchen, you give it a try. Friends, I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Take care.